it was like no matter how rude I was, no matter how much I put people down, caused problems, manipulated, instigated, refused to do things, the response was love. And instead of slamming consequences, teaching me, you know, I saw that you did this and that you said this. What if you did this instead? What if you said that instead? And then I would respond with whatever thing was in my mind, justification,
Yeah.
poor attitude. And they would respond again. What if you thought like this? Have you ever considered this? I had never been talked to like that. So they were turning not only my poor choices, but also my poor thinking into an opportunity for me to learn.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today, I've got Rebecca Armstead with me. Rebecca is an amazing woman who is truly making this world a better place. Why? Because she focuses in her transformational leadership courses and in her mentoring, in her work, on the most difficult humans, in my opinion, to work with. And these are young humans, young teenagers who are so driven by their hormones and emotions and feelings and are constantly changing and growing up and trying to find their place in this world. And I have never, ever, ever met any human on this earth who said, yeah, I felt normal, that I belong during being a teenager. Everyone felt out of sync with the world. How the hell do you approach these people? And if you're a parent out there, you're just nodding your head. I know you're a bobblehead now. So, Rebecca, it's so great to have you on my show. Let's explore that and let's explore what we can learn from your work and from the lessons you probably had to learn the hard way. Welcome to my show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm actually super excited for this conversation.
My goodness, you chose one of the most difficult group of people to work with. How did that come about?
It came out of my own experience as a youth and young adult of being probably one of the most, if not the most difficult people in anyone's life that was involved with me. So it came out of my own struggles, immense struggles as a youth and young adult.
Do you want to share a bit more about
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Why were you such a challenge?
Well, as with most youth and young adults that have severely destructive patterns of behavior and thinking, I had a lot of trauma. So, lots of traumatic abuse as a child, sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse. There was alcoholism in the home. I lived in the midst of a violently abusive marriage, so witnessing that,
Mm.
and eventually ended up in the foster care system in New York, and passed around from foster home to foster home, group home to group home, residential facilities, youth psychiatric centers, and then eventually landed in an all-girls lockup in New York and was there for almost 3 years. So we're talking like a youth prison, if you will.
Oh,
And was there for, like I said, almost 3 years, and then was kicked out of that place because I was so, as they would say, out of control, and was homeless as a teen on the streets of New York, and suffered horrendous trauma of violence, was shot at. I still have a scar on my hand from being shot at in a drive-by shooting. Not particularly at me. I just was in front of a house when there was a drive-by, and multiple rapes, during that time, and ended up pregnant eventually out of rape, and then in that pregnancy was finally rescued by an aunt and uncle in Dallas who found a maternity home in Texas that where I could go and start to get help and support. So that I was rescued ultimately, and that kind of began the journey of my life being turned around.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Talk
So
about adverse childhood experiences. That is, I mean, you tick probably all of them. And you, wow, bloody hell, where to start with that?
yeah, that's
This
that's
is a
the
brutal, brutal upbringing. But for you, it
it.
was normal when you were in there, isn't it? For you,
Yeah,
it
it's like a dime a dozen, honestly. And it sounds crazy to say that, but when you live in an environment like that, whether it's on the streets or in these homes,
Mm,
there's hundreds of other people like you. And
mm,
so, us sitting here now and people listening to this, it might be difficult for you and others to wrap your head around what that could be like because you're not in it. But those of us that were in it, it was all we knew. We didn't know
exactly,
what was going on
exactly,
outside of
exactly.
our lives. And if there was some sort of beautiful, wonderful life out there, it wouldn't want anything to do with us, because there's just so much shame and brokenness, and we put on a tough skin and
Mm,
a tough presentation, but in the depths of kids like this, there's immense shame and fear
mm.
and loneliness and uncertainty. So it's out of that place, that birth. I guess it could be my why. It's the why behind what I do, because it ultimately led me, or to the development in me, a core belief, which really kind of, I would say, is the main belief that that no young person, no youth or young adult should be written off. No human being should be written off. There is always hope. There is always hope. There is always purpose, and nothing that we go through has to go to waste. It can be used for good. It can be used to, bring hope to someone else. We come out of the fire, and we can help others come out of the fire. So yeah, so that all of that developed, if you will, that belief in me, and it's what drives me towards young people. The heart, it's like the ones that are written off and the most complex, layered, and on, quite frankly, might be on a path towards abusive pathologies, a criminal behavior. These are
Mm.
the ones that my heart is most drawn to.
Immediately, several questions come to my mind because the Rebecca that I'm meeting now and the core belief that this Rebecca has is beautiful. And it actually is a very similar core belief to what I have got right now.
Mm.
But the Stefan and the Rebecca that are talking to each other are a million miles away from the trauma and from the original versions of us. And the original versions of us, I dare to say, without even knowing you, I know that your core beliefs were different. I
Yeah.
developed a core belief that there is no one out there to help me. And I saw some evidence in the world around me that strongly pointed me towards that. There is no help. You need to look after yourself. You can't trust anyone. You're
Mhm.
alone. Okay. So I became the lone wolf. I became the warrior. I became the Viking. I became that person, and that person suited me and saved me. I moved from victim to survivor, but I got stuck there for a very long time, and that came with its own destructive, yeah, core beliefs, number one, and then behaviors, number two. How was that
Yeah.
with you? I mean, how did you switch off? How did you escape in your mind from the
Yes.
hard times?
And that's really key.
Mm,
That journey of changing what was in my mind. You hear everybody talk about mindset. So going from what really was just a trigger mindset
mm,
at the core, to an opportunity mindset. And that was a long process that I didn't even realize I was in. And all of that has led me to what I do today. So like when I went to the maternity home in Texas with this trigger mindset, everything that I had been through, every even thought that came to my mind, or, choice that I made, or reaction that I had, really was looked at in my mind as, well, if that, then this. So like, if that hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened.
Mm.
If they hadn't have done that, then I wouldn't have done this. And I had a very, almost an entitled attitude. And I feel like a lot of these young people
Yeah.
have entitlement that they don't realize is there, because they're also victims.
Mm.
And so it's really easy, as someone who's been a victim of a lot of abuse, to not realize that you have an entitlement attitude. And what does that show up as? Justification. So
Mm.
my choices are justified because you don't know what I've been through. My attitude is justified
Mm.
because my parents abused me, or because you just said that to me. My hatred, my anger is justified because of all the rejection. So these are not things that we automatically, it's like in the front, like conscience of our minds. So like at the forefront of our minds, but they're what drives. It's that core, like, core beliefs of how the world operates. And when you're young, as adults, we can kind of develop these mindsets of justification and entitlement, but we are better able to regulate our choices, our emotions in public, whereas a young person can't. So you have the fragmentation of the self in childhood when there's trauma. So the young person, as they're developing as most kids do, they have to develop a cohesive sense of self, right? So acceptance of their weaknesses and recognition of their strengths, being able to take responsibility and recognize poor choices they've made, while at the same time recognizing that, who they want to be, and that they're on a journey to that, and making peace with all of that, asking for forgiveness where necessary, and forgiving. But a young person who's experienced a lot of trauma doesn't have that. They're very fragmented. So there's the shame-driven hiddenness of the brokenness, things they've done. So that's why you'll see lying and denial and, blame shifting, and then justification even, and then kind of like putting on a front, because they don't even know who they're meant to be. So they put on a front, typically, what they see in the culture around them. So they might, take on a certain subculture, music culture, language, anything that can build up a wall of defenses to protect the woundedness inside, because they can't. So when you see a young person, all that to say that when you see a young person who's in crisis, and maybe they're fighting, they're stealing, they're abusing others, controlling, manipulating, using people, having outbursts of anger and rage. This is a kid that at the core just doesn't know who they are, and are deeply ashamed of, the struggles and the weaknesses and things they've done, the things they want to do, and just trying to survive, if you will, with that front that they've put on. So, but underneath all that, there's purpose, there's potential, and I feel like for my own journey, how I developed a new mindset was in how people around me began to treat me. So I went from an environment of, even the placements that I was in, staff that got paid to work there that were burned out and would, scream at us, cuss at us, restrain. I was constantly on restriction. So I went from that to a maternity home where everybody volunteered. They didn't even get paid. So this is like, it's like a church ministry. So these people are there just because they want to be, just because they want to help us. I had never experienced that. So that was kind of the first thing that was like a new piece of information that I didn't have. I didn't know that people like that existed.
Wow.
And then as I was there, it was like, no matter how rude I was, no matter how much I put people down, caused problems, manipulated, instigated, refused to do things, the response was love And instead of slamming consequences, teaching me, you know, I saw that you did this and that you said this. What if you did this instead? What if you said that instead? And then I would respond with whatever thing was in my mind, justification,
Yeah.
poor attitude. And they would respond again. What if you thought like this? Have you ever considered this? I had never been talked to like that. So they were turning not only my poor choices, but also my poor thinking into an opportunity for me to learn. So that was the beginning of a process that I wasn't even aware was happening, that began to shift my mindset. Do you want me to keep going into the
It's
various
so
stages?
beautiful. You're such an eloquent speaker, and I don't need to ask any questions here.
Yeah,
You're just so beautiful in your red line weaving through your past and through your transformation. And if
yeah,
we were to just you say so many golden nuggets there, you drop so many of them, but it is the power of love that is there. Love can be so disarming. Had
yeah,
they responded with anger or with confrontation, with legislation, with maybe judiciary in the sense of law enforcement, my goodness,
mhm,
your walls would have been even stronger. Your fighting would have been even more aggressive. Yet
yeah,
the moment they put love in front of you and acceptance, the way you are, raw and warts and all, that is so disempowering as far as all the negative things are concerned,
yeah,
and so empowering as far as breaking down the walls. Isn't
yeah,
that the key point to it all? How
yeah,
beautiful is that you experienced that finally after years and years of having to fight and being the fighter, being the scrapper, being the rebellious teenager or tweens by now. It is, you're an amazing woman there, just for the sheer fact that you survived, that you somehow kept
yeah.
going. Where there, you are focusing on the fight, on the anger, on the rebelliousness, but there would have also been depression, anxiety, fear that would have
Yeah, I would say
permeated.
fear. There was a lot of fear in me. I feel like I went from, maybe there were periods of feeling depressed, but I feel like I was in a constant state of crisis
Mm,
and trying to avert crisis that I don't think the adrenaline would have allowed me to even have so much downtime in my nervous system for
mm,
depression to even take hold.
mm,
I look back, knowing what I know now, I understand what was happening. But earlier, I just would have said, yeah, I was never depressed because I never was diagnosed with, it was anxiety, right?
mm,
So anxiety was there, but never depression. But it was because the cortisol going
mm.
through my system,
Absolutely.
the adrenaline, it just was nonstop. Yeah, so I'm saying that because I could have been depressed, I should have been, but
Mm,
there was no safe space for me to
mm.
even feel that,
I hear you.
which is it's very damaging to the nervous system, which I mean, years and years later, I still have to be very intentional in how to carry, my nervous system.
Beautiful. How did you escape in your mind? When I asked the question earlier, I was actually referring in my mind towards the things that you run away from, i.e., alcohol, drugs. Um, were they playing a role in your life?
There's addiction and a lot of misuse of alcohol and drug
Mm,
use. My younger brother died of an overdose, accidental overdose with drugs. So I didn't though. That
mm,
wasn't my path. I did drink.
mm,
So I drank quite a bit towards the end of my time in New York, but we're talking maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of a
mm,
lot of drinking. And then when I discovered I was pregnant, I just
mm.
stopped and I
Oh God.
actually didn't drink again. And then drugs, there were a few instances when I ran away from a placement and 13 years old, 14, where I 2 times tried a drug. One time nothing happened. The second time I ended up in the hospital because it was laced with something. That's really the only experience I have. I didn't turn to that. I don't know what I did to cope. I think I just tried to have, probably my attitude would just have fun. Now, of
Mm,
course, towards the end, there was no fun.
mm,
But initially, when I was emancipated and just, running around
mm,
being foolish, it was a drive to have fun. But, freedom. I'm finally free of all these places and I can
mm,
do whatever I want, which is the lie. That's the lie. I can do whatever I want now. I'm free.
mm.
And that was foolish. But a lot of youth have that attitude. I can't wait till I'm 18 so I can do whatever I want.
Mm.
Even youth that don't have trauma sometimes can have that attitude, and they really should take the opportunity to learn all they can before they go out, and not waste that opportunity. I wish I
So,
had that mindset.
which teen has that mindset? Even,
Yeah,
even I was about to say, even sort of the children of psychologists or the children of influencers, whatever, in the positive sense, influencers. They know when you speak to them, typically the answer is now, what does dad know? What does mom know? It's this inbuilt, nah, that's whatever the parents say, and it doesn't count.
yeah,
And I fear that this will be the same for the next few millennia, because it has been that for millennia. There's a
yeah.
there's a beautiful comment written, and when you read it, look at the youth today. It is, how they're eating, how they're dressing, how they're behaving, no respect for the elderly, no respect. I mean, it's awful. And you think, there's someone, who has written that? And then you look back, it was written 3,000 years ago from Plato. And so nothing
Yeah.
has changed, I think, from 3,000 years ago. And I don't have much hope that it changes. But then again, that does not mean to say that with the right leadership and with the right cues, we cannot disrupt this often self-destructive behavior and those thoughts that are so weird. Now, let's be clear, we have got 80,000 thoughts thereabouts every day. And that
Yeah.
is true throughout our life. And 80% of them are designed to keep us safe. So they're
Mhm.
negative. They try to hold us back. They try to protect us. But at the same
Yeah.
token, if we don't learn that we need to cross-examine each and every thought that comes through our mind and question every choice that we want to make, then we are making choices that probably are not so great for us, and often enough due to fear. And now these core beliefs are typical for young adults who have grown up in very chaotic environments. You
Yeah.
don't trust people. You There is a certain sets of behaviors, the trauma responses can be either fear avoidance or fawning or etc. What were your trauma responses? What were your beliefs that you really had to work hard to ditch them because you realized that they helped me once, but now it's a different story.
Yeah, I really feel that the trigger mindset was my biggest issue. So things that happened, um, anything that I thought about it or that person or that situation or any way that I reacted was justified because of what happened. So
Mm,
I was a victim to circumstance. I was
mm,
always a victim to what others said or did instead of somebody who has agency in their life. We talk about youth, and young adults in the mindset and like not
mm,
trusting people, not wanting to
mm,
listen to mom and dad. What's interesting, and I don't remember the studies that I've read, but youth that grow up in homes of entrepreneurs that
mm,
instill that entrepreneurial spirit and mindset and give their kids books on entrepreneurship and leadership,
yeah.
those kids learn to have an opportunity mindset, which is to take everything that happens as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to do better, be better, expansion.
Yeah.
So I find that, and I look back as my mindset was changing, which was negative. I ruminated on things that had happened to me. I ruminated on things people said to me. I ruminated on things that I had done and said. And it was just a swirl around and around and around that got me nowhere.
Exactly.
And so as those people, you said disarmed me by what they would say, like, well, have you thought about this? It disarmed me. That's a great word. I'm going to start to use that. I've been using the word confused. It confused me. I had never been asked those kinds of questions before. And I really it wasn't an immediate thing, but in the moment when they would ask me those things, I would think about it. What if? And so again, there was this process that began to happen. What's interesting is that's not the journey. That wasn't like the end. It was only the beginning of seeds of opportunity thinking that were being planted in me. I went through the maternity home, and kind of grew in that new thought process. And then after that, I placed my son for adoption. I was initially going to keep him, but I realized that I was a mess and he needed a family that would have the capacity to love him as they should, and provide for him what he needed. So that was a very traumatic experience, placing him for adoption, but just the whole story of that, they're just miraculous how that all came to be. So I made it through that, and then took a couple months and lived with a family in Texas and worked a little job. And then I actually went into the ministry that kind of was over that maternity home. They had like this program where you could go and serve and go overseas and learn how to serve others in other countries. And so I did that. So here I am, like not even a year off of the streets of New York. And now I'm in this place surrounded by people who are kind and loving, and who are speaking to each other in ways I had never experienced. So I'm like learning what is empathy-based communication. How do you come into a conversation with someone and contribute and collaborate and learn how to consider the perspective of the other and understand that your perspective is not the only perspective. So I was learning all of this by just watching and witnessing people talk to each other as they should. And then as I went out and I began to contribute, so it's really interesting what happens, and you probably have experience in this, but when you're in the midst of brokenness and self-hatred, you don't know this, but there is a core belief that you have nothing to contribute, that you are a problem. And when you are given the opportunity to serve others in even small ways, maybe you're going in and you're cleaning someone's house that is destitute and helping build something in their home, or bringing food to people that have none. We did some incredible things in communities like in Brazil, in Russia, working with orphans, and that was transformative. So now I'm learning that even as the broken, I still knew what was in my head. I still knew the thoughts that I struggled with. I still knew my attitude was not as good as others. But here I am serving others in the midst of that. So I do have something to contribute. And then after a period of time, we would go and we would speak at various places. But I never, I didn't speak anywhere because, I just thought, who wants to hear me talk? But then they started giving me the microphone. People that I looked up to, and I thought, man, I could never be like them. They're passing me the microphone, giving me the floor in front of tons of people. And I knew that not only was I representing myself, but the organization that I was with. And I began to share. My story a little bit. And back then it was like, if I can do it, you can do it too, sort of a thing. But like just having the opportunity to be able to speak and to use my voice and use what I had been through to encourage someone else to be trusted with that by many people that live what I saw as flawless lives that, didn't have all of these poor choices that they made in their past. It was profound. And that was another thing. So it was a shifting in my thinking that in the midst of brokenness, we still can share and encourage others. In the midst of brokenness, we still can contribute. And while we are doing that, we are being changed. So as we give to others, as we speak our story to encourage others, we are being changed in the process, sometimes more than those that we're contributing to and speaking to. So all of these things, honestly, like there's dozens, all of these experiences they were transforming my mind, my mindset, how I viewed the world, how I viewed myself, how I viewed others, and really set the stage for what I do now, in working with youth. And even the degree that I went and got, is a part of all of that. Is there anything you want to ask? I feel like I'm just like talking
But
and
it's so beautiful now, and you're doing
yeah.
so well. You're doing so well because you have gone through such a transformation. You have gone through such a beautiful, beautiful path. I'm going to say beautiful for crying out loud. Is a very traumatic path, but you found purpose. You found a mission, deep, driven from deep inside your heart by all the negativity you have seen. You have experienced the darkness, and then
Yeah.
you have seen the light, and you were drawn to it. And in turn, you did not just see the light, you became the light. You became initially that little flicker of a candle when you were standing there uncertain the first time you held the microphone. I can just see envisage you. And then the moment you started talking, the ice was broken, and you were able to share and to be there. And sharing is such a powerful thing. To again, you think you are nothing, you're a failure, you're a loser. You would have labeled yourself in your mind as the most negative person on earth, the biggest scum. And then
Yeah.
in reality, you started by taking ownership, by
Mhm.
changing yourself, by intentionally making different choices, by choosing to show up, choosing to go out to serve others. You took so many steps guided by wonderful people around you. And this was so amazing. So you have had this beautiful growth there. But for all that, it is all of that took a lot of action, took a lot of stepping outside of your comfort zone. And for that, I
Yeah.
applaud you for crying out loud. But then again, it is said that if you surround yourself with six artists, six painters, it's very difficult for you not to become a painter, however good
Yeah.
or bad you are in painting.
Yeah.
And it's the same with millionaires. If you surround yourself with successful people, then it's very difficult not to take on some of the positive role modeling that you see there. That is
Yeah.
that is the biggest choice that we can have. We can choose what we put our attention on. Right
Yeah.
now, a million things are happening. I can focus on something negative, something painful. I can consume the standard media and get worried about the world. I can choose that. Or I can choose to listen to a podcast or choose to be quiet for a moment with my thoughts, accept them for what they are, good, bad, neutral. I can choose to
Yeah.
stand out in the sun for and just look at the sun, soak up some vitamin D, and enjoy that moment with gratitude. These are all choices you can
Yeah.
make, and they will have flow-on effects. And that's exactly what you experienced. I'm so pleased that you suddenly found yourself in an environment where good choices were role modeled. And that is
Yes.
probably the most powerful thing, the role modeling. People might have
Yeah.
not even said anything to you, but you actually seeing them in a world that you could not even imagine when you were younger is so
Yeah.
beautiful. It's powerful. That is that is leadership at its best,
Yep. It's influencing and inspiring others. And that
isn't it?
at the end of the day, that is what changed me. It wasn't
Mm,
someone, telling me what I should
exactly.
do or what I
Exactly.
should think or giving me consequences or rewards to
Mm,
modify my behavior. It was consistent demonstration
yeah.
of how we should be. Even, you talk about ownership.
Mm,
I really want to share this because this is going to be probably instill some curiosity in someone listening to this. Is it safe enough? Is it safe enough to share it? Let me tell this story. So, like when we are in the midst of shame and wanting to hide things we've done, things we've said, things we think, right? So we hide it because we think, maybe it's nobody. If people
mm,
knew this, then they would reject me. If they knew this, they wouldn't let me be here.
mm,
Those kinds of things. And eventually it can become so hidden that, we forget that it's even there. But I had lived a life of hiding things. Now I was a very vocal person. And if I wanted to share something, I would. But in general, you hide things like
of
because those
course.
are shameful. So
Of
one
course.
day in this organization, as in the process of traveling and sharing, they had what they called an openness and brokenness night. Now I was like, what is that? And basically they set up a microphone. They set up a microphone at the front of the room, and everyone was invited to come and share things that they had done that they were ashamed about, to bring it into the light and to, if you will, like get it off their shoulders. And
Oh,
then
wow.
after everybody did that, we basically we did like this little symbol, like it's like kind of like symbolism, I guess, but like we wrote those things down on paper
Yeah.
and we burned them
Yeah.
because they were gone. Right. So I watched person after person come up and share things that I was like, what? Initially as a young person, you're like, you did what? Like things that you can't imagine. But then as it went on and, people were crying and, just trembling as they shared these things that, I was like, man, I would never share that. I was moved. I was moved, especially watching how people responded to them, hugging them, loving them. I've struggled with that too. You have? People realizing they weren't alone. And it emboldened me. So this was a thing that they did fairly often. And one day I finally did it. And I tell you what, the very first things that came out of my mouth, it was like, tear, but then it just poured. It just poured out. And I was a mess of tears and people came and hugged me and I heard stories that, oh, I struggle with the same thing. And yeah, I did that too. Or, my cousin did that. And this is what happened. They did this and changed their life. And it was
Wow.
so freeing. And that was, again, one of those little seeds that was planted of taking ownership and responsibility. But not just that, it's safe to bring it out and to talk about it because it frees up other people. I was freed up to share mine as I watched other people share theirs.
Mm,
And healing can happen when we all come together and just recognize
mm,
that we're all struggling. We all have weaknesses. We've all
mm,
done things that we wish we hadn't done.
mm,
But when we hide them, we're stuck. When we bring it into the light, we're free.
mm.
So that was, yeah. So anyone out there that needed to hear that, there you go.
And it's a beautiful, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
I think what my show has taught me is that you look at someone and you think, wow, what a leadership, what a person, what a charisma, what a manner. It's beautiful. And you meet them, and then they suddenly open up about their past, as you said, and are open and vulnerable and honest and talking about their poor choices. And you see that completely different person. And I think that exists in
Yeah.
every life. There are so many people out there who, I mean, I would say that 99.9% of people just show us masks. So you
Mhm.
see what they want you to see. And that mask is built
Yeah.
from pain and is built to protect them and is built often in very powerful ways. And there is often so much pain hidden behind, and you often only see that when they are suddenly triggered. I love that you call it your own trigger mindset. And
Mhm.
it is it's not really an active mindset. It is just you are living on a hair trigger because that is what protected you in the past. You responded to
Yeah.
cues immediately because the cues, that your sixth sense of constantly looking for danger around you
Mm.
was very, very life preserving. It was
Yeah.
very acute. So it served you very well. You are here. You could have been dead in an alleyway
Mm.
with multiple gunshot wounds or stabs or strangled to death after a rape. All of
Yeah.
these would have been very real outcomes in your past. And violence is out there. That's the other thing that we need to accept. Yes, here we are modeling and trying to be the best versions of ourselves, but we can't just say, okay, how beautiful is this world now? When in
Yeah.
reality, violence is very real for all of us. And it can hit you at any one moment. That could be the violence of a motor vehicle accident, or it could be true violence of someone who just either wants your money or is just a pathological piece of shit,
Yeah.
or maybe shall I rephrase, is just so hurt that they're constantly making the wrong choices and you're the victim
Yeah.
of those choices. So
Yeah.
without actually now labeling them, just accepting that people make wrong choices, and that might include the knife that is piercing your skin. For you,
Yeah.
it's trauma. So accept that. We need to live in a world where where we have the right set of
Hmm.
triggers, where we have, or let's rephrase that. If you imagine that you have got a firearm, then you can set the trigger to a certain pull, which means that it can be a hair trigger. The moment you touch it, it goes off, or it can be really, really hard to pull. How about a safe middle ground where there are still triggers there and you can be calm, but accept that, hang on, there is something really wrong in this environment and you behave accordingly. And that you also recognize, hang on, this person really triggers me. This person really
Hmm.
pushes my button. That's a powerful position to be in because you have recognized that there are buttons. You've recognized that this person right now is pushing one of them, and you actually have not yet reacted to it. Wow. Oh, that's amazing. How can we get
Yeah.
there? I mean, how do you teach your youngsters how to get there? Because they have got these hair triggers.
Yeah.
How can you encourage them to stop for a moment before making a choice that they later regret?
There's a couple different things. So if we're talking about a an individual that has ADHD, so with an ADHD mind, there is the impulsivity.
Mm,
So with that individual, it might be something like um, if they have a strong, sense of impulsivity, sitting with that urge
mm,
and, thinking about focusing on the urge in their system to either do or say
mm,
something to disrupt, to interject, to interrupt the process that's happening. And that has to be something that that kid wants to do. And those that want to do it end up doing quite well with that. Now, if you're talking about someone that does not have ADHD, with which a lot of young people do, I mean, it is on the rise. But if you're talking about someone that doesn't, and they are able to pause, so they have the ability to pause because they don't have that impulsive component, then it is just shifting. It's just a slight, it feels like a really big shift, but it isn't. And once you
mm,
practice it, you can master it.
mm,
Now, I'm not saying, like you talked about, that alert system. So if you're in an environment
mm,
and you can sense danger, that would be more of a discernment. So you have your little alert system and you're discerning there's danger in the environment. Yes, there's a trigger, right? That would be a trigger. But the triggers I'm talking about are something happens that's outside of our control,
mm,
good or
mm,
bad. Maybe it impacts us, maybe it doesn't. And we react to it or we make a choice because of it, and
mm,
then hold that thing that happened as being responsible for our reaction. So someone might say something that triggers an emotion in us, right? So like
mm,
someone might say to me, um, you know, you're really tall. Okay. And because I have this insecurity in my life, or people made fun of me because of that tallness, I might have an initial emotional response inside of me, but I get to choose how I respond to them. So if they say that and I turn and I look at them and say, something rude, or like just kind of jump all over them, why would you say that? Why would you call out somebody's height? That's so, whatever I would say. That was my choice.
Yeah.
So instead of, and then I might say, well, if they didn't say that, I wouldn't have said that. So instead of having that attitude, when they say that to me, I pause and I recognize the response inside of me, the emotional response inside of me. And I ask myself, why is that there? What is the root of that? Why do I have this emotional feeling rise up in me when they say that to me? And if my thoughts are negative towards that person, I can ask myself, what is it that's going on inside of them? Or what has their experience been that they would ask me such a question, or that they would say such a thing? So it's having curiosity about what's going on, or what the experiences are of the other person, trying to understand their perspective, while at the same time reflecting on and being intentional about understanding what's going on inside of me that would cause me to have that emotional. So it's before the reaction even happens. So you're pausing and you're getting curious about what's going on inside of you, and you look at everything as an opportunity like that. Now, I'm not saying that if you are in an abusive marriage, or there is, you're a teenager and your parents are abusing you, that you just walk around, like, oh, it's opportunity, because you're going to be damaged in the process. So we can be wise. We can utilize those alert systems. This isn't safe. This isn't healthy. This is damaging. And then, remove ourselves in a way that, right. So we're not going to cause damage as we're leaving, but we're going to remove ourselves and make sure that we're safe. But just in general, in everyday life, these young people and even adults that have been doing this for years and years and years don't think that way at all. They are ruminating. They're ruminating on pain points. They're ruminating on things people have said or done. They are, allowing themselves to react. They're allowing themselves to make choices and justifying them because of what happened, because of what somebody else did, instead of taking that time. You could look at two different situations. The one I love to use the most is, especially with young people. Let's say that person, let's call them Bob and Fred. Let's say that Bob is sitting in a room and reading a book, and Fred comes in, and Fred really wants Bob to pay attention to them. Bob has been ignoring them for a couple of days. And so Fred comes in and says Bob's name. Bob ignores, doesn't respond. So Fred sits down and he starts poking Bob. Poke, 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 poke. And Bob says, stop, stop. And Fred keeps poking. And then Bob turns around and punches Fred in the face and gives Fred a bloody nose. So now Fred is there crying and saying things like, why did you punch me? What is wrong with you? And Bob is saying, if you didn't poke me, I wouldn't have punched you. And then Fred might say, I wouldn't have poked you if you had not ignored me for 3 days and I was saying your name. So it just becomes a if, and why, and da-da-da, and never taking the opportunity to reflect on what's going on inside. So when you have kids with these kinds of struggles and you approach it as, stop, what are you, you're grounded, what the heck, da, 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 da. Instead of this, okay, Bob, I hear you saying that you wouldn't have punched Fred if Fred hadn't have poked you. What if you asked yourself what's going on inside of you that would cause you to punch when somebody pokes? And what's going on inside of Fred that makes Fred feel that you're not paying attention to them? Is there something that you're doing that might be causing that? And hey, Fred, I hear that you're feeling pretty lonely for Bob. Bob's ignoring you. He's not responding. And so you came up and you poked. But what is going on inside of Bob that Bob wasn't responding to you? Maybe you could ask Bob what's going on inside of them. And what's going on inside of you that would cause you to poke? Was there a better way? Was there a better way to get Bob's attention? So like when you approach everything by creating opportunity, that's how you begin to shift the mindset from a trigger mindset to an opportunity mindset. But that's not what most facilities, placements, parenting methods teach. It's a consequence reward system to modify behavior. And let's be real, I don't know if you have kids, but a lot of times it's just to keep the parent from having to deal because they don't have capacity to deal with it. And then it just keeps going. And so that, you know, those individuals just, if you will, increase in a trigger mindset, go off in their future. And if they have abusive pathologies, right? So if they're one that is responding and reacting to the world and what's happened to them through violence and hurting and manipulating others, that will increase when you're talking about a rewards and consequence system instead of teaching them between those ages of 15 to 25, when their brain is still developing. That's why we should not write any of them off. If you're a parent listening to this or somebody that works with youth and you've got a kid and you're like, okay, we're just surviving here. There is no hope. Don't write them off. Their brain is still developing. And take the opportunity from hearing this message from someone who was one of those young people to get your hands on whatever you can to teach them an entrepreneurial mindset for leadership principles of empathy-based communication, collaboration, negotiation, contribution, authenticity, integrity, transparency, inspiring others, motivating others, considering others' perspectives, teaching them these skills, because they're all skills. You may look at someone and say, man, they would never do that. Oh, they could. They could. They just don't know how. And that probably would think that nobody would pass them the microphone to even try.
Oh, beautiful. And that is so true, isn't it? Oh,
Yeah.
but it is so hard for the parents too. We see you here having transformed completely. At the same token, if I was to look into a youth prison, or if I was to look at society in which I am living, there are so many examples of failure of that transformation to have happened. So you were saying between 15 and 25, don't give up. It is not just like midnight on 25 that there's a line in the sand. I think we all have got the opportunity to change, and sometimes it takes longer. And
Yes.
sometimes those mechanisms that have protected us when we were hurt as youth or as young men, it takes a lot of lessons and it takes a
Yeah.
lot of time to heal. Healing
Yeah.
takes time, and therefore it is the lessons that you're sharing right now are so beautiful. But remember, there would have been 20, 25 years of pain in your case, and then there would have been at least 20, 25 years of healing.
Yeah.
So, and it's only after that period of time that you are the version who is now turning up in such a beautiful way to lead others, to help others, to be a voice for those youth who are still struggling right now out there.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful, but we need to have the time. We need to give it time. You can't expect, like, okay, I'm now
Yeah.
showing one sign of love, and look, he is not responding or she is not responding. See, it's
Yes.
a waste. It's a
It is,
waste.
it is a process, and some kids it's longer than others. And I do want to, yes, I mean, champion any adult over 25 that is doing the work to change. It is harder after 20, once the development has finished, and you've been in patterns of behavior and thinking for a long time. It can be very difficult, but it is definitely possible. We should write off nobody that is willing and hungry to do the work. And really don't write off anybody, but if you're in a situation where there is significant abuse happening, I'm not saying you stay there because there's hope that they're going to change. You get yourself safe.
Absolutely.
But certainly, there's always hope.
Rebecca, you're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. My goodness, if you were able to go back in time, if I can lend you my time machine, and you go back to the 16-year-old version of yourself, what would you tell that version?
Honestly, what would I have been ready to hear? Probably hang in there.
Mm,
Hang in there. Um, Hope is coming. It's here. You can't see it yet, but it's coming. This
mm,
season of life is gone just like that. And you have a whole future ahead of you, full of
mm,
wonder and experiences that you can't even imagine.
mm,
Hang in there because yeah, it's like you want to give up. I mean,
mm,
why live? What
mm,
what's the purpose? What's the meaning of
mm,
life? This? I don't want this.
mm. I think I would go back and give the younger version of myself a huge hug
Mm,
and just tell him I love him and that it's going to be all right. So a very similar message, but I certainly would use the love language that I now know I need. I would
mm,
use, in addition to the words, I would specifically target what I now know that I had been missing for a big chunk in my life. So I think
So
it
is your
is,
love language physical touch? Like, is
yes,
that, yeah, mine is
certainly.
words.
There you
Words.
go. There you
Yep.
go. How beautiful. But
Words.
this is something that we had to learn. This is not
Yeah.
something that one day you wake up, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, I know my love language." These are all conscious choices that you made. You read something, you listened to someone, you became curious and developed yourself. And I think that is the biggest thing that I think we should model, that the curiosity with regards to getting to
Yes.
know more about life, getting to know more about yourself. How do you tick? Accept the negative traits and the negative coping mechanisms. Ask yourself, well, where do they come from? And do they still serve me? And it's so beautiful when you do that work. It's often a very painful work because you have to admit that you were saying a lot about, oh, look what they did to me, and that's the justification kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's to a certain degree the victim role because they did that. That's the reason that I now drink a bottle of vodka. Ha! That will show them. Yeah, about
Yeah.
that. These
Yeah.
are the kind of certain behaviors, and the moment you actually put a spotlight on them and you show that they maybe are not so productive, again, there's a chance that this causes pain, that this causes new trauma, this causes more shame and guilt. How the hell could I not see that? All these kind of things. How do you deal with shame and guilt nowadays? There will be still times when your mind plays a certain time in your maybe distant past, maybe recent past, where you think, "Oh God, I wish I would have responded differently." How do you deal with these negative emotions of shame and guilt?
I bring it into the light. So I have two people that are continue to mentor me and love me. They've been involved in my life since I was 18, since I was basically, well, 19, almost from the moment I was rescued. And when I mess up, I call, I message, I bring it into the light and allow them to speak into my life. Because obviously I don't have, right, all the tools, skills,
Mm,
capacity that I need to be able to navigate those things because I'm making poor choices or I'm
mm,
responding
mm,
poorly. And so having those people, that I trust dearly,
mm,
to be open with and accountable to really, really helps me because we're never done. I mean, it's not like I'm sitting here, pristine and everything. I do everything as I should every day, and I view everything as an opportunity, and like it's just like figured out. These are things that I have learned, and I feel like I've mastered to a pretty good deal, but I still mess up. I
oh yeah.
still fail. I still, have stinking thinking. I don't know if you've ever
Yes.
heard that phrase,
Oh
but yeah,
yeah. Oh, it has been a
stinking
while that I
thinking.
heard
Yeah.
that.
So I bring that into the light. It's good to have people to share with and receive from. and just being willing. And that keeps you humble, that keeps you whole. As soon as you start hiding things away out of shame, you are fragmenting yourself and you're going back down a path of, justification and maybe into, a lot of poor choices. So it's empowering. It really is. At the end of the day, this new mindset of looking at things as an opportunity and being open and broken, right? Sharing, bringing our things into the light. It's so empowering because we are not, in everyday life or the cruel things that people say or things that happen to us. We're not just walking around victimized by everything. We have agency. We are empowered to respond in the opposite, just like the people responded to me and me cursing at them, and they responded with curiosity. So we have agency. We have the ability to show up in a way that communicates that we are steady people. We are trustworthy, as much as we can be as finite human beings, but we are trustworthy to have that desire to be steady and safe for people to even make mistakes with. When you are a trigger mindset person, people can't even make mistakes around you. They can't learn or grow because they're like, you're going to blow up on everything they do. So you communicate that I am steady. I am going to be a safe space for you to make a mistake. And not only that, I'm going to love you in the midst, and I'm going to help you get curious, because I've learned that curiosity, I'm just another beggar, right? Leading others to the bread. I've learned that curiosity leads to healing. You want to come with me and be healed with me?
Wow.
So it's really empowering, and it transforms you for the rest of your life, right? And then and create space for others to heal and be transformed as well.
Well, oh, what an interview. You are constantly triggering me. You're constantly making me reflect on either choices I've made, or your words just have a very intriguing influence on my mind when I see constantly new pictures appearing, opportunities appearing of healing. There's so much going on in my mind because you touch upon so many beautiful opportunities ultimately that we have. And
Yeah.
I think negative emotions are indeed opportunities for us to examine how we can heal further, what is really going on in our life. And instead of running away from them with social media scrolling or throwing yourself into work or alcohol or sex or gambling, whatever it is that you're used to hide from your emotions, I think there's so much we can learn from them. Again, I need to say that this is not an easy path, but it becomes easier every single time you try to do it. As
Practice.
same, exactly, it's the same with push-ups, or it's the same with any kind of other skill that you're learning. Every single time you're getting a little bit better at it. And it's the same with dealing with our negative emotions and dealing with difficult scenarios, difficult situations around us, showing
Yeah.
up and being ready to confront them, and but also showing yourself the love and respect, because there will be days that you cannot open that email and that you're basically petrified to the bone because of something, and that fear
Yeah.
is okay. Accept it for what it is. That is something that is right now sitting in your heart and it's eating you, and still love yourself. Accept yourself for what you are. Make sure that you're hydrating. Make sure that you're eating something healthy at this moment. Make sure that you're standing a moment in the sunshine. Make sure that you're maybe trying some diaphragmatic breathing,
Yep.
some techniques that allow you to take back control. I think that's the biggest thing. Emotions are one thing, but the emotions then are coupled with very physical responses.
Yes.
The
Yep.
panic attack as a classic example,
Yeah.
or the kind of really shallow breathing. Well, how about we practice how to take deep, calm breaths, calm our breathing down, and with that change our physical state, literally with that. So we accept that the emotions change our physical state. Well, how about we go other way around? Let's change our physical state with something that we can
Yeah.
learn and therefore influence our emotions. I
Yep.
think that is so beautiful. Does that play a role? Do you teach that to your
Yeah.
youngsters?
Yeah, mindfulness. So in the moments when, they're struggling with something that's happened, like teaching mindfulness and also getting the nervous system to a place of rest and digest. So you're
Yeah.
either in fight, flight, or freeze. I also hear the term fawning,
Mm,
or you're in a state of rest and digest. So working with the vagus nerve, right, the
mm,
core of our nervous system, doing vagus nerve work and other things to bring the body, because the trauma is in the past, right? It's like there's things that happened, right? We think, no, trauma is now.
mm,
Trauma is stored in our bodies. Our body is
mm,
still thinking it's running from a bear.
mm.
So we
Exactly.
have to do the things in the process of changing our mindset, which helps, right? It helps
Mm,
the nervous system. Um, but do things with our bodies to speak to the nervous system. You're
mm,
not running from a bear. You're
mm,
safe. And there's, you if you do this kind of work, there's all kinds of things like breathing, tapping,
mm,
grounding,
mm,
various things,
mm,
cold, right? Cold
mm,
immersion,
mm,
things that we can do to get out of fight, flight, or freeze.
mm,
I love that you do that. I think
mm.
it's such an important part of the process.
Exactly. And it's again something you can practice and something
Yeah.
you can do. Yesterday I was feeling quite ratty and I was working hard on post-production of the show and creating a course. And I found myself every 20 minutes walking out there, standing barefoot on the wood and looking into the sunshine, even for 30 seconds. And then somehow I was recharged and I was regrounded and I could come back in. But I was all over the show. But I accepted that and I didn't get upset about it. I just said, okay, for one reason or the
Yeah.
other, that is what is happening. And I became like this kind of yo-yo, horizontal
I
yo-yo, in
love
and
it.
out and in and out. And it was what it was. And then 2, 3 hours
Yeah.
later, I was absolutely fine. I got suddenly very focused and very wow, and it
Mhm.
flew from then on. But it could have been other way around. I could have made the choice of getting really pissed off, angry with myself. You bloody failure! Look at that! You can't even do that. Who are you? The imposter, the kind of. Do you get that still? Do you get an
Mhm.
imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, I think that is very common with people that come from trauma backgrounds,
Huh.
to always have like it's like you walk with a limp. Like when you've been through a lot and you've done a lot, you're going to walk with a limp. But even the limp is something that can encourage others. Like, look, I'm walking with a limp, but and you can walk with a limp. It's okay. So yeah, there definitely I feel like, what am I doing? Who am I? And who is my family, or what is my past that I am in this place doing this thing? I don't belong here. There's always things that kind of come and speak those lies, in our minds and in our bodies.
Hmm.
But as we practice, right, and we can see the fruit of that, even our walking with a limp, like it's okay, right? It's okay to walk with a limp and have grace for each other. We're all walking with a limp, and let's do it openly. Openness and brokenness. And in that
I love.
process, we'll all get healed as much as we can in this
I
life.
like that. I like that a lot. And a scar only makes you more interesting, I always thought.
Yeah,
And that
yeah,
you have got the scars to prove that you showed up in life and that you're still here. So I think this is a
yeah,
beautiful, beautiful thing to say. You have got so many beautiful pictures that you put in my mind. And I'm really, really grateful. You're an amazing woman, Rebecca. You do an amazing work with some very, very difficult young people. And it is so empowering. It is so soul warming to see that you're out there and doing this kind of work, that you're not giving up on people where maybe society has already given up and has labeled them and has put them into a nice little convenient drawer because they don't know what to do. You have
yeah.
given us tools how to do that, and that is typically that showing love and modeling in your daily life
Yeah.
a different path. I think let's call it like that. A path where we too know it's hard. It's not an easy path, but it's a path of integrity and it's a path of vulnerability, authenticity. I think it's the rawness of this path that has its own beauty. This is not an easy
Yeah.
path, so be aware you will stumble on this path because
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
But we're all stumbling with you, so keep going.
Well, exactly. I love that. I love that. Rebecca, you're amazing. If people gel with you and want to know more about you and try to even get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can go to my website, riseleadershipllc.com. They can reach out to me through that and also
Mm,
LinkedIn.
mhm.
You can also find me on Facebook, Rebecca
Yeah,
Armstead. Yeah, any of those ways.
wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You're amazing. Thank you so much, guys. Look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast because all of Rebecca's details are down there. And what have you got to lose? More importantly, ask yourself, what have you got to gain? So much. So therefore, Rebecca, hopefully you will be able to find the strength to keep going in this work. Find the joy in this work. Find your own compassion with others. Because it's so difficult as a leader to sometimes get lost yourself. And you recognize a good leader by the amount of arrows in his back. So it is sometimes it's a very lonesome place to be a leader. So I applaud you there, and it's so amazing to see what you're doing. Hopefully, you will be able to continue for a very long time like that.
Thank you, and I
Mm,
hope so too.
mm,
I hope that that I'm able to contribute and
mm.
help others see that there's so much hope, whether they're young or old. There's always
Beautiful,
hope.
beautiful. And you guys out there, look after yourself, live with passion, live with intention, and look after yourself. Bye.
Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.